So I have no idea why this camera has to do like the shifting where am I thing in the beginning, so I apologize because it's going to be pretty annoying. But I just wanted to maybe start off with my first video just talking a bit about the different types of diagnosis under the autism spectrum. There's been a lot of new trends that are coming out with a lot of doctors, which kind of adds to the confusion a bit. So I'm just going to kind of talk about it in my own makeshift way, what each diagnosis is, what does it mean. Maybe I'll talk about a little bit of the characteristics. And again, if you guys have any questions about anything that I'm talking about, excuse me, want to provide clarification or don't agree with me, absolutely please post and we can open up a dialogue. So I guess the best way to picture autism is like an umbrella, and I'm sure some of you in the field have heard of this before, but kind of at the top is, and again this is my makeshift, is what's called ASD and PDD. So ASD is autism spectrum disorders, PDD is pervasive developmental disorder. ASD and PDD are interchangeable because ASD is actually a pervasive developmental disorder. So sometimes when you're in the doctor's office, or if you're talking to healthcare professionals, they sometimes use ASD or PDD. That is just talking about the overview of autism. So that means that they are talking about an autism spectrum disorder. I know there are some people who do actually have an ASD diagnosis, and I'm actually going to talk about that a little bit later on. So the most common diagnosis that someone can receive is autism. Currently in North America, about 1 in 96 people have a diagnosis of autism. And when you think of autism, you kind of think of the more, I guess, characteristics of what it could be is like hand flapping, making lots of noises, no eye contact, there's a lot of rocking, kind of like this, not really social. There are, in the medical field, they like to call somewhere between mild, moderate, and severe autism. I don't personally like referring to autism in some sort of range. I can understand where people come from, because someone with mild autism, they're more likely to be able to speak, be able to socialize. People with severe autism are have the tendency of needing, toileting support, so help in the bathroom, help feeding, help around that, and tend to have a lot more of sensory issues. So sometimes in the medical world, autism and ASD are interchanged. So some doctors do actually give a diagnosis of what is called ASD. And so ASD is a form of autism for some doctors, and again, this is some of the trends that I'm talking about that kind of confuse people a little bit. So in my experience, ASD as an actual diagnosis seems to be a mild form of autism. So people with ASD are more likely able to talk, they're able to function on a more quote-unquote normal level. However, ASD typically and historically has been used to talk about the spectrum, to kind of encompass the spectrum. However, sometimes doctors are finding that people who have more higher functioning autism better suit the ASD sort of diagnosis. Next is Asperger's. So Asperger's syndrome is, again, under the spectrum, and people with Asperger's, usually there's a lot of misconception that they have high functioning autism. It is high functioning when you compare it to someone who has an actual diagnosis of autism, just because typically these people are able to hold down jobs, they are able to have conversations. But where I get weary of the high functioning aspect is because people with Asperger's do tend to have severe anxieties. They are able to talk, but as if you are a parent or know someone with Asperger's, they tend to not know when not to talk. So there is a huge key socialization aspect that also comes into play with things that can be quite debilitating for a lot of people, and it's hard to make some friends sometimes. There are definitely a lot of famous people who have Asperger's, Michael Phelps, Albert Einstein, to name a few, Bill Gates, all have autism. It hasn't necessarily been something that they've necessarily come up with, but some of the characteristics that they have shown in the past kind of allude to the fact that they have Asperger's syndrome. The next one, get it in there, is PDD-NOS, and that's pervasive developmental delay, not otherwise specified. And basically with PDD, this is a catch-all to everything. So say that you are noticing some differences with your son or daughter, aren't quite making their developmental milestones. You go do all these, it's either the ADOS testing, which is one type of testing that doctors can use, or sometimes they just use the DSM. And so basically what they do is they realize that, okay, this person, and usually the way they do it is under a checklist. So this person scores, 5 under socialization, 2 under communication, and X amount of behaviors, but they don't quite fit the autism protocol, but at the same time, they don't quite fit Asperger's, because the main difference between Asperger's and autism is that there's a delay of speech in people with autism. Asperger's, there is not a delay. That's another controversy that I can talk to you about in a different video, I guess. PDD means there's somewhere, I don't know where to put them, so we're going to slap this on there. Sometimes it's associated with cognitive delays, or PDD and developmental delay, global delay, whatever it is. But this is definitely kind of a catch-all for doctors who can't quite place somebody in a category. Rett's disorder is a autism spectrum disorder. It is something that is diagnosed only in females. Right now it's a 4-to-1 diagnostic ratio. For every 4 males, a female is diagnosed. Sorry, my fan is on. So with Rett's disorder, the only main difference characteristic wise that you're going to see between someone with Rett's and someone with autism is actually hand wringing. So you'll see someone who just does this constantly and is rubbing their hands kind of back and forth, almost kind of like they're wringing them out of water. As far as like intellectual ability, it is someone who more or less, and because everybody's so different, it's really kind of hard to kind of say the range of where they're at, but you often find someone with Rett's kind of around the same lines of someone with autism. Lastly, CDD is childhood disintegrative disorder, and basically what this is a very rare form of autism, and it actually happens in 1 in every 1.7 million people, and it happens in both males and females. The one unique feature, I guess, characteristic about CDD is that it actually autism can be devastating for anybody depending on who the family is. But with CDD, it's actually typical development up until the age of around, give or take, 4 years old, at which point a child basically loses all their skills, which includes talking, can include toileting. I've actually only ever met a couple people with CDD myself. I've never met anybody with Rett's as of yet. Because Rett's is just as, if not more, uncommon as CDD is. The most common types of autism you'll see is Asperger's, autism, ASD, and PDD-NOS. So if you do want to get a bit more information, this is again just kind of a brief overview of autism and kind of what the different diagnostics might be. I hope you found that helpful, and please feel free to ask me questions if you have any, okay? Thanks. Bye.